Alright, so I thought I'd do a quick post-qualifying video. I don't even know where to start. There's so much stuff that happened during qualifying. During Q1, Jaime Alguersuari was the man who got caught in the drop-off, and he actually qualified behind both of the Lotuses. So, disturbing stuff there. And then Sebastian Buemi was just in 17th. So Toro Rosso having some really big issues there. The two Hispanias of Carthagena and why am I blinking? Liuzzi did not set qualifying times. They had issues with their cars, and actually I think even their fastest practice times wouldn't have got them under the 107% rule. Either way, the stewards are letting them take place in the race tomorrow. I'm not sure that's a good idea, namely because Monaco is such a short track that some people have referred to back markers as mobile chicanes, where it's not going to take very long for the front runners to catch up with the the HRTs and the Virgin Racing cars and start to have to lap them. And I think, the job is already difficult enough around Monaco that if you can't, get a car through the 3 practice sessions into Q1, if they had, at least gone out and run times in Q1 and it's like, oh, they're at like 108%, then I'd say, okay, they're close. But, for whatever mechanical reasons, they weren't able to even make it to Q1 and put down a lap. And that's problematic for me. But I'm not a steward this weekend, so it's not up to me. But then in Q2, a bunch of people went out that were not used to having go out in Q2. Vitaly Petrov didn't make it to Q1. Paul di Resta was down in 14th. Kamui Kobayashi was 13th. Adrian Sutil in 15th. So the Force India sliding back. Nick Heidfeld was down in 16th. So Renault have really not developed as much this season as they usually do. I think Kubica was somewhere in the top 4 last year. So I'm not sure if without Kubica the team's not getting the information they need to develop, or if because of, management and funding changes, they're not getting the development, money and programming that they need. But Renault is moving the wrong direction, and they are one of my favorite teams. So I'm looking for them to start moving in the right direction, moving up the grid. The top 10 was Vettel, Button, Webber, Alonso, Schumacher, Massa, Rosberg, Maldonado, and Lewis Hamilton. I only said 9 names there because there was an incident with about 2.5 minutes to go in Q3. Sergio Perez came out of the tunnel, and like we've seen a couple of cars do over the first 3 practice sessions, he had an issue coming down to the chicane. And I'm not sure if he obviously got offline in the tunnel. He was on the outside of the turn, and there's a little bump when you come out of the tunnel. And what drivers are having problems with is that if you're coming, once you enter the tunnel, to the time you get down to the chicane, you're constantly either moving, steering, or going over bumps. It's not a straight shot, it's not a straight at all. It's one long, continuous, hard turn. And what happened, it happened to Rosberg in 3rd practice, basically running a little bit wide, and then when you cut over towards the guardrail to get ready for the apex into the chicane, what happens is you hit the bump. So you're changing directions, you're braking, and you hit a bump. And what happened with Rosberg, he got out of shape, ended up cutting the chicane, hit one of the sleeping policemen, and not actually sleeping policemen, a speed bump in the middle of the chicane. And that kind of launched him, and he ended up missing the Techco barrier by inches, perhaps an inch. Basically what happens is we had a bunch of people snapped their front wings on the what would be the inside going into the chicane, and snap a front wing, lose a front wheel, and you've got, nothing to turn with, no downforce. You're a passenger at that point. And the same thing happened with Perez. He was on the outside, went to the inside, hit the Armco barrier on the inside, lost his front wing, lost front wheel, the rear right folded underneath the car, it looked like. And instead of going, straight down the escape road, or, cutting the chicane and making the straight into the swimming pool section, he hit the Techco barrier. He slid in, he hit it sideways, and they ended up having to extract him from the car, and he went to the hospital. No broken bones, a concussion, considering he probably hit it at over 130 miles an hour. All the safety systems did their job. The Techco barrier, the side of his Sauber was completely obliterated, but it was a very safe crash, if you can call a crash safe. But it was interesting listening to the commentary. People were saying, they were showing, the BBC was showing flashbacks of David Coulthard, who's now commentating. He had the same problem back in 06, I think. Or 08, one of those two. And, Eddie Jordan was talking about how, this has been a pretty continual problem, and so maybe it's time for the, track officials to do something about it. It's clearly not a car problem. And to that, at first I was like, yeah, we're having this problem. But then I thought, but everybody knows that that's there. They all know that there's a bump coming out of the tunnel. They all know, they all know it's there. It's kind of, like the bumps in Turkey going into the final section. They all know that's there. So the teams have decided to run cars with a lower ride height, maybe less suspension travel, stiffer setup, and that's something they need to design and set up their car around. I don't think it's the job of the track marshals to say, well, here, we're going to, flatten every surface so that you can run the, least amount of ride height, the stiffest car. They're engineers, they're drivers, they need to be able to cope around the track. It's not, like a manhole cover that's, flipped up like we've seen in, past years that's done damage. This is a characteristic of the track. There's a bump coming out of the tunnel down to the chicane. You need to either set your car up correctly or enter the turn, enter that straight, being closer to the inside without having to, do a direction change and braking over the bump. And I think, they'll say, well, it compromises the car, but they wouldn't go to Turkey and say, hey, turn 8 is really tricky. It's really tricky for us. We'd like to run less downforce for higher straight line speed. So can we straighten this turn out? It's a defining characteristic of the track, as is the bump going down to the chicane. And there are plenty of drivers who make it. It's part of Monaco. Monaco, it's one of the hardest races. That's why drivers like to win it the most. Same thing with Saint-Devote, the first turn. In practice, people were just going through it and through it and through it, going into the runoff areas, or, sliding and slapping the Armco barrier, and that's part of the track. That's part of its difficulty, is that you have to be on it, your car has to be set up, and it demands your complete respect. And so I'm glad that Sergio Perez is conscious. He seems to be fine other than a concussion, but I'm not convinced the track needs to be changed. But anyways, so Vettel got pole again, 6th consecutive pole. Button is starting second. The race has overwhelmingly been won from the front row. If you're not in the front row, you're not going to win the race. It's over like 60 or 70%. Like it's one of those races that there aren't a whole lot of places to pass other than down into that chicane that caused problems for Rosberg and Perez, and you've really got to qualify well. So, good job for Vettel and Button. Hamilton had qualified, I want to say 7th, but he ended up, on his fastest lap, he actually cut the chicane coming out of the tunnel, and so they deleted that time and bumped him down into 10th. So we'll see what happens there. He claims that Massa blocked him, but the stewards didn't, assign Massa a penalty or let Hamilton keep his time. So exciting stuff there. I hope Sergio Perez gets better, and I can't wait for the race tomorrow.